Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about the best recordings of Dvořák's Violin Concerto. Now, this is the third and last recording video. What are we doing here? Video of the Dvořák concertos, because there are three major ones. There is an early cello concerto, but we don't have to pay attention to that because it was never orchestrated, although it has been since, of course. But we need to talk about the three mature Dvořák concertos. We've done the piano concerto, we've done the cello concerto, and now it's the time for the violin concerto, and I am really excited to talk about this work because it is in some ways the most misunderstood, or at least misjudged, of all of the Dvořák concertos, even more so than the piano concerto, which was just ignored. So we could rehabilitate it on the basis of ignorance. With the violin concerto, it's not so simple. The violin concerto had a very, very tortured history. Dvořák wrote it for Joseph Joachim, if you want to call him that. The same guy that Brahms did his violin concerto for. This is the Joachim, the guy who sort of put the Beethoven concerto in the repertoire. He was a student of Spohr. He was enormously respected. Enormously so. A decent composer in his own right as well. Conservative, but decent. And he was the guy that Bruch wrote his first concerto for, which he was playing to great success. And so Dvořák quite naturally thought that since he had, Brahms's publisher, Simrock, and he was going like gangbusters, that he would write a violin concerto and send it to Joachim, and hopefully Joachim would accept it and perform it. Well, Joachim turned out to be a real jerk when it came to this concerto, because Dvořák did a few things that annoyed the Brahmsian faction. The most important thing he did was he cut short the first movement. He did not make it a big, full, recapitulatory symphonic sonata form with cadenza type thing. He just didn't do it. He joined it to the slow movement, and thereby made it a little bit shorter than it would otherwise have been. Now, you wouldn't think that that would make any difference. I mean, who cares whether or not it has like a full recapitulation and, Well, all I can tell you is that back in the day, this kind of crap mattered, because form in the later Romantic period was really looked at in a very formulaic way. It just was. You were either following in the great German classical tradition, or you were a Wagnerian or some sort of evil creature from another planet like that. Dvořák was neither. Dvořák felt it was his right to follow in the classical tradition when he felt like it, and to do something else when he felt like it. So Dvořák dug in his heels. He really dug in his heels. I mean, Joachim kept the manuscript for like years and never returned it, and then said he wasn't going to play it, and then wanted Dvořák to revise it, and Dvořák did revise it. Dvořák revised the concerto to tighten it up in any number of ways over the ensuing years. So it was all sort of a beneficial thing, because Dvořák was one of those composers who gushed out music and then afterwards sort of looked at it and polished it up and knocked it into shape. Rather like Sibelius, actually. He did the same thing. Brahms was quite different. Brahms composed, first of all, more slowly, and second of all, only released things after he had sat on them for a long time and they were all polished and honed to perfection. It was a different way of working, and one isn't worse than the other. In any case, Dvořák did revise the concerto, and he made some changes, probably some suggested by Joachim. You have to remember, in those days, most violin virtuosi wrote their own music. It was proprietary to them. And to write a concerto for another person who was not going to play it, especially in the violin world, was still a little bit special. It was becoming less unheard of as we got to the second half of the 19th century, but it was still something. And as a result of that, Dvořák didn't need Joachim's advice in how to write for the violin. Dvořák was a string player. He was a violist. He was a practical, working string player. He played viola at the Prague Provisional Theater for like a long time, and zillions of performances in the pit of operas and whatnot. He knew how to write for the violin. He knew how to write for the viola and the cello and whatnot. That wasn't the issue. But Joachim would have made changes which would have made it easier for Joachim, or more effective for Joachim, because every violin soloist, I don't need to tell you this, or you violin people know this, will have their own proprietary way of handling certain fingerings, especially in quick passage work, and ways that they do things that other violinists don't do, because you have a lot of options on the violin in terms of which strings you push to play which note and in what order and how you do this, and whether your fingers are all whacked out the way they're supposed to be, and so Dvořák would have written it in conjunction with Joachim if Joachim intended to play it, and would have made some revisions, just as Brahms worked with Joachim on his concerto. So that's not the issue. The issue was form. And everybody was so quick and so hasty and so smugly certain to tell Dvořák he didn't know what to do with form, because he was just a little Czech peasant with a melodic gift who was naively writing long pieces without giving much thought to the shape. Okay, now we're going to talk about the facts, because that is such crap. It is such crap. The fact is, Dvořák's Violin Concerto is formally one of the most perfect concerti ever written. Period. It's amazing. As Dvořák left it, it consists of 3 movements, each of which are absolutely almost identical, depending on tempi and performance, but within a few seconds of each other in length. They are each about 10 minutes long. They can go 10 to 12, they can go 12 to 10, 10 to 9, you know what I mean. But they're all equal in length and size, and the result is just perfectly proportioned. And what's even more important is that in most concertos, and especially in classical concertos, the most important movement is always the first, which is why it's usually double the length of, or more than the length of the other 2 combined. And Dvořák did not do it that way. Dvořák threw the weight of the work onto the finale. And in so many romantic concertos, the finale is just not very good. They bog down, the finale bogs down, and it's thematically not as distinguished or interesting as its first movement. That happens time and time again in the lower tier of the romantic concerto, especially violin concertos for some reason. But in Dvořák's, the finale is absolutely the most exciting movement of the piece, and I think it's the best. Not that there's anything wrong with the other ones, but the work leads to the finale, which makes the finale one of the most satisfying in the entire concerto repertoire, and a really outstanding example. And what really pisses me off about it is that nobody bothers to realize how much care Dvořák took to really make sure that the work was well integrated and beautifully, perfectly, harmoniously structured, just because it doesn't have a big long sonata recapitulation and a cadenza at the end. It's so stupid and so thoughtless, and so what I'm always talking about, which is that people don't listen. I mean, they just don't listen. They just don't listen to it and see, geez, didn't that work great? It's just the right length. Everything balances out beautifully. And it is, of course, absolutely full of Dvořák's best tunes. And nobody was better than Dvořák at writing tunes. It is gorgeous melodically and rhythmically sprightly and splendidly orchestrated. It just doesn't have anything wrong with it at all. Notwithstanding this, because of its history, the piece has always been dogged by its reputation as being somewhat formally dysfunctional and a concerto of the second tier. Now, everybody plays it. Violinists play it. And they don't play it live so much, but they all record it. Why? Because they need something to do. Because there are like 5 great violin concertos in the world, right? There's Mendelssohn, there's Bruch, there's Tchaikovsky, there's, Sibelius, there's, in the Romantic period, there's Beethoven. You do those, what else you got left? There's one by Saint-Saëns. You may get up to 10 of them. And the great violinists of the world need more than 10 pieces to play in their entire career. So when they're making records, at least, they generally turn up and they do the Dvořák when they've done everything else. And that's its reputation. It's the leftover violin concerto by a major composer, because it's got a great name attached to it. And so that's how the Dvořák has sort of slumbered through the ages up until now. Now, what's happened to it, though, of course, is because of the record explosion, when everything has gone insane in terms of duplication of repertoire, the Dvořák has come into its own, I think, lately, at least on disc, because I mean, they need something to play by a major composer, and actually it gets featured now and again now on its own on records. Of course, it's always had that standing in the Czech lands and the Czech Republic, but everywhere else, not so much. And so there's a younger generation of violinists who've taken up the concerto very, very successfully because it's just enormously grateful to play and exquisite to listen to. And I want to take you through it a little bit, just for fun, just because I want to just show you how beautiful, how sheerly beautiful it is, and how exquisitely written it is for the solo instrument. It's just marvelous. Let us begin at the beginning. Now, there is a reference recording of the Dvořák Violin Concerto, and there's no point in pretending it's not, because it's superb. It is the Josef Suk with Karel Ancherl and the Czech Philharmonic on Supraphon. This has always been the one that everyone recommends, and rightly so. It's an absolutely fantastic performance. Beautiful and detailed and totally idiomatic, and there's nothing to say against it. And it's one that you should have, for sure. I'm going to talk about a dozen others, but this is one that you should definitely have. And I want to talk about the piece using this as our reference. And then we'll get to hear a couple others, or at least bits of a couple others, because, why not? It's fun to do. So, here we have, are you ready? The beginning of the concerto. I mean, how can you not love a concerto that begins like this? Gorgeous, isn't it? Absolutely magnificent. Beautiful, beautiful piece. And after that sort of rhapsodic introduction, it speeds up, and there's a stormy and dramatic sonata allegro movement with beautiful themes, and everybody is happy, and it comes to the recapitulation, which immediately sort of slows down and bogs down until there's a romantic connecting link that leads directly into the slow movement, which features an absolutely exquisite tune. I mean, it's one single tune. It plays for a good 2 minutes without pause. It's one of Dvořák's most gorgeous lyrical inspirations, and here it is. is that beautiful, isn't it? I mean, what violinist in their right mind wouldn't want to play it? And of course, playing the piece is, tunes like that is a wonderful test of a violinist's taste, his sensitivity, or her handling of vibrato, his or her, whichever you do, its handling of the melodic line, their handling of the melodic line. Pick your pronoun. The musical requirements are the same no matter what. So, and then there's like a nice stormy central development section with a military tattoo on the trumpets, and it's just great. And then we come to the finale. Now, the finale is usually billed as, well, it's kind of like a Slavonic dance. It's a Czech dance, a Furion, one of those dance things. Well, yes, it is. It actually consists of a couple dances. It's in a big ABA form. And it has the most captivating opening tune that is so exquisitely orchestrated. I mean, you have the violin in a high register shadowed by the orchestral violin softly behind it. And the result is just enchanting. It really is just an exceptional instrumental effect. It never fails to make an impression. And so here is the opening of the finale with Josef Suk and Karl Antrell on Supraphon. It's so beautiful. Here you go. Okay, now, I wonder if you noticed something. People who always piss on Dvořák because they say his form is dysfunctional. The fact of the matter is, this opening theme uses a technique that Dvořák actually uses quite a bit. He did it in the Fifth Symphony, too, in the relationship between the finale and the second movement. It's very, very wonderful because Dvořák was one of the great variation writers that ever existed. And the opening of this finale is essentially an inversion of the opening of the entire concerto. Because if you listen to it, it goes da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum bum 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 like that, right? Well, this is just the opposite. Turn it upside down and you get bum ba da 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 da. That's what it is. And nobody mentions this. No one gives Dvořák any credit for it. But Dvořák had the true classical technique under his fingers, just like we hear in our Haydn Symphony Crusade, where you can bind pieces together as wholes using thematic reminiscence and resemblance. You don't have to be direct, you don't have to be literal, you just have to have a sense of the melodic shape and the direction of the phrase, and whether you recognize it consciously or not, it's there. And you hear it, obviously when it's played, and you make these connections. And Dvořák's Violin Concerto has those connections. And they are formal connections, and they're quite wonderful. The other thing that's absolutely fabulous about this concerto, in the finale anyway, is this wonderful enlivening sense of rhythm that comes, of course, from Czech folk music. And there is a fantastic Timpani Solo that you have to hear. It's one of these moments that I always listen for, to hear if they bring out the timpani and you can hear the contrast, the rhythmic tension between the main theme and the counter rhythm played by the timpani underneath. It's just wonderful. And in addition, you have a drone with the sort of oboes doing a little bagpipe thing. Oh God, it's gorgeous. It's fabulously, fabulously captivating. And here is that marvelous, marvelous moment. And then we come to the ending. Now, how many concertos have you heard where the ending is just, it just doesn't cut it. It sounds like it's working itself up to something, but the phrasing is flabby, and the whole thing sounds like it just is gasping and pulling its heaving carcass barely over the finish line. This concerto has one of the best endings of any violin concerto, because not only is it exciting as hell, it makes musical sense. It's not emptily virtuosic for its own sake. It is incredibly virtuosic, but it just works. It's such a thrill. And when you hear it live, as I have a few times happily, it really should bring an audience to its feet, because it's so exciting, right up to the very, very last notes. So here is the ending of the Dvořák Violin Concerto. That, my friends, is just greatness. Absolute greatness, and no one is going to tell me otherwise at all. So anyway, I want to just now go through the recordings and tell you which ones I picked as my 12 favorite. I've only 12 favorites. There are many more, actually. There are quite a few more, and I've kind of divided them up into... Well, let's start with Josef Suk, because he's our standard. He did it with Anne Churl, and as you can hear, it sounds marvelous, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But he remade it with Václav Neumann and the Czech Philharmonic. Also a very, very fine performance, and slightly better sound, a little bit slower in tempo in the first couple of movements, but a little quicker elsewhere. It's a different interpretation. It's worth hearing, and it's not worse. There's also a tendency for everyone to say everything Anne Churl did is better because it's older. Well, yeah, sometimes it wasn't, sometimes it wasn't. You have to listen, and you call it all on a case-by-case basis. But Suk was the owner of the Dvořák Violin Concerto for many, many decades, because other violinists just weren't playing it with any regularity or seriousness, giving it the pride of place that it surely deserved. And since Suk was Dvořák's great-grandson, well, there you go. He damn well better have treated it special, and it's just a fantastic performance. However, there are a whole bunch of very, very fine performances by who you might call the old school traditional romantic virtuosi. Oistrakh did a recording in Russia that's really pretty good. Isaac Stern did it with Ormandy. It's very, very good. And I'm not going to pull them all out and wave the CDs around, but I have them, and it's been very, very well handled by most soloists. It has not been well handled by critics and the public and the people who theoretically should be paying attention to these things and a little bit more care and love that the music deserves. So let's, who else has done it? Well, remember this huge box, the Slavonic Soul? It's got Perlman's recording with Daniel Barenboim, which is also quite good. But again, Perlman is sort of a case in point for what happens. He makes the Beethoven Concerto, he does the Brahms Concerto, he does the Tchaikovsky Concerto, he does multiple recordings of them, and then you'll see one Dvořák Concerto, not multiple recordings of it, because it's just the Dvořák Concerto. So, you have to do it, and very well. Very, very well. Very beautiful, but people don't ask for it, or at least not to the same degree that record companies are going to make multiple versions of it, or soloists want to record multiple versions of it. But Perlman's quite good. It's in this big box, and if you got the big box, go listen to the damn thing. What are you waiting for? Put it on, for heaven's sake. All right, now here are some other ones that I just picked out kind of quasi, well, not really at random, but just because I like them. This is Ruggero Ricci. This is on Brilliant Classics. It was on Vox. It's coupled with the cello concerto with Zara Nelsova, which is also very, very good. It's the St. Louis Symphony and Walter Susskind, who had, the orchestra before Leonard Slatkin came in. And it's really, really good. It's a very nice performance. Ricci was a beast. The violin was not known for beauty of tone necessarily, but for enthusiastic rhythmic power. And that's what you hear here. There are moments when I think maybe his phrasing is a touch stiff in a couple places, maybe a little bit in the finale, but it's a very, very good performance. And it's fun to hear Ricci, who is really in good form here. So that's that one. It's on Brilliant Classics. It's really cheap. And you get the cello concerto as a coupling. I mean, that's a deal, right? But the best earlier classic great violinist Dvořák violin concerto guy after Josef Suk, we always have to keep in mind, but in the West was Nathan Milstein. Milstein did it twice. He made a mono version for RCA with Antal Dorati. It was coupled with his Tchaikovsky violin concerto with Charles Munch in the Boston Symphony. Very, very fine. And there's the one in this box, which is with Steinberg and Pittsburgh. And it's also just wonderful. Milstein cared about this concerto. Clearly, it's 1,000 pities he didn't get to do it for the third time for Deutsche Grammophon, or one of his later labels that he was recording for. It's a pity. But boy, there's nothing wrong with Steinberg. Believe me, and the sound's quite good. His performance of this is just fabulous. Totally world-classly wonderful. And you really ought to have, first of all, the Milstein box, because it's Milstein, but you should also take pains to listen to his Dvořák concerto, because there was a case where you had a major internationally acclaimed artist lavishing all of his considerable ability and attention on a work and giving it the love that its masterpiece status deserved. So Milstein is one of my big choices. In fact, I'm going to make a separate pile here, hang on a second, for the final cut, and we'll take it from there. Now, among the younger people who have been doing it lately, let's see who we got here. We have, and these are all very good. I mean, they really are. We have Julia Fischer with David Zinman and the Tonhalle Orchestra of Zurich. A very, very attractive performance, shapely and lithe and quite winsome. And we have Maxim Vengerov with Kurt Mazur. This is what you might call more of the Russian Germanic school. It's a little bit slower, a little bit heavier, but very romantic. And Vengerov was just, fantastic. It's gorgeously played. I enjoy this performance quite a bit. It's in the big Vengerov box. I don't know if you can still get it separately, because it's coupled with the Elgar Violin Sonata. God knows why. They needed something to put on the disc, so that's what they put on the disc. A real sleeper is in this box. This is the Naxos box of Dvořák, the published orchestral works. I did a separate video about this, and it's with Ilya Kahler and Polish forces. It was recorded as the Polish National Radio, whatever it is, and it's an extremely fine performance with a particularly light and zippy and attractive finale. And I'm going to play you a little bit of it because you deserve to hear it. It's really, really a sleeper of a performance. Do not misjudge it. It's excellent. So here we are, Ilya Kahler, the finale of the Dvořák. Really, really good. See, we take Naxos for granted at our peril, because they've got so much stuff that's as good as anything else out there. Truly is. So that's a nice performance. And it's if you've got that box, you've got a really good Dvořák Violin Concerto. So pull it out and listen to the damn thing. Come on, guys. What are you waiting for? Girls, folks, them. All right. Now we have like just 4 really, really top-notch performances that have come out recently. And some of them are coupled interesting. Like this one, for example, on Bis. This is Richard Tognetti with, let's see, the Nordic Chamber Orchestra, conducted by Christian Lindberg. This is a very, very distinctive and interesting performance, again with a very lively finale. It's just really peppy, which is wonderful. And because it's a chamber orchestra, and the piece is not heavily scored. I mean, there's no trombones and tuba in this piece. It's just trumpets and horns and, the usual. But this is very light and very energetic, and it's coupled with the legends. I love the legends. Oh, God, the legends are so beautiful, and they never get any love. I have to do a whole separate talk on the legends, too. What a great piece that is. My goodness. Gorgeous, gorgeous work. 38 minutes and 10 movements. I mean, someone ought to pull it out and do it once in a while. It's just fantastic. So this Bis recording is definitely worth considering with Tognetti. And then the sort of successor to Josef Suk is Pavel Sporchel. And Mr. Sporchel here, it's Sporchel. Mr. Sporchel, wait a minute. No, it's not. It's Sportzel. That's it. Takes me a while to get all the accents and diacriticals, but I'll get it eventually. Sportzel. That's his name. Like Spätzle. Okay, anyway. He's a wonderful violinist, and here you get the Dvořák and the Tchaikovsky with the Czech Philharmonic. The Dvořák is live. I think they're both live, actually, and really exciting live performances. And what's interesting about this is that the conductors are Ashkenazy and Bělohlavek, but Ashkenazy conducts the Dvořák, and Bělohlavek conducts the Tchaikovsky, which is not what you'd expect, and it's really cool to hear it done that way, quite frankly. There is, of course, hysterical applause at the end, but, you just turn it down really quick when the concerto's over. It's a very, very fine modern version of the Dvořák, and the fact that it's live, I think, really does add a certain level of tension to the whole thing that works really, really well, and Ashkenazy is a fantastic accompanist. That's the word, accompanist. So there you are. Well worth considering on Supraphon. And, it's a very good Tchaikovsky, too. There's nothing wrong with that. And they work well together. And I actually kind of like having them together on a disc because it shows you that the Dvořák does not fade in comparison to the unbelievably, insanely famous Tchaikovsky concerto. I actually like it better. I really do. But that's me. So, others would probably disagree, like the rest of the world, but that's okay. Okay, next. Oh, this is so much fun. This is fabulous. Anne-Sophie Mutter and Manfred Honeck. Now, as you know, Honeck is a beast. I mean, he's exciting as hell, and now he's turning into something that's mannered as hell, at least in Beethoven. But I'm hoping he still does great stuff elsewhere and doesn't become a total navel-gazer. In any case, he's not here, and he's got the Berlin Philharmonic, and he's got them playing like demons. And Anne-Sophie Mutter, Anne-Sophie, what's become of her? Well, she's kind of become a romantic crazy person. And some of her recordings are just so slovenly and so excessive. I mean, she's got this huge vibrato, and she uses lots of portamento now. It's sliding between notes, and and she lingers over phrases, and it can just be a hopeless mess. But here it's not. Yes, she adds quite a bit of schmaltz to the piece, but her tempos are, she's a little slow in the first 2 movements, but she really tears into the finale. It works really, really well because Honeck goes completely ape on the accompaniments, which really helps too. But the point I want to make is that this is a piece which can really withstand a little bit of romantic schmoozing here and there. And I think that in terms of idiomatic style, she's really onto something in the way she plays it. It's a thrilling performance that I think everybody should hear. I really do. I loved it when I heard it because it was distinctive without being ridiculous. And the fine line everyone's walking today is the need to do something different, the need to do something different without sounding stupid or vulgar or just random. And she doesn't. There is method in her madness, and she's got me hooked all the way. However, if you want a modern recording, an absolutely first-rate modern recording that I think really does the concerto full justice by somebody who's also recorded it twice. Let us not forget, it's this one on Ondine with Christian Tetzlaff and John Storgards with the Helsinki Philharmonic. This is an SACD, actually. And it is wonderfully recorded and fabulously played. Now, Tetzlaff did it before on Virgin, coupled with the Lalo Symphony Espagnole, the bane of my violinistic existence, And that is a weird coupling. And it was a very good performance. It got a lousy review on Classics Today for some reason. Not by me. I didn't agree with it. I always liked Tetzlaff, and I always liked his Dvořák. And this is a really interesting, intelligent, lively performance with phrasing that's rather different than other violinists sometimes do. And I think it adds personality, and it has plenty of character, and it's just played to the nines and recorded to the hilt. And I have a tiny little bit of this one too, the fabulous bit with the timpani doing their thing in the finale. And I think you should just have a chance to listen to that too, because it's so much fun, and it sounds quite different from József Suk. It really does, but equally valid, and I think really a modern reference version. It really is just tremendous. So here is a little bit of the finale from the Tetzlaff Storgards Dvořák Violin Concerto. Good stuff, isn't it? And I just admire violinists. Usually I'm not into duplication, you know what I mean? There's too much of it all, right? But in this particular case, we've got a concerto that needs the help. It needs people to love it enough to want to do it more than once. And so I respect Tetzlaff for doing it more than once. And where does that leave us? I have here 4 what I might call reference versions that you really should get as you come to know and love the piece as much as I do. They are, you ready? Of course, József Suk with Anshirl, the one we started with, and the one from whence the musical examples come. It's absolutely not aged a day. It's fantastic. And then Tetzlaff, of course, who we just talked about, who's tremendous on Ondine, fantastic. Anna Sophie Mutter for the total let it all hang out romantic approach to the piece, which is perfectly valid and is so refreshing in this day and age where we have people who are doing everything with this neat, clean, theoretically authentic, expressionless, vibrato-less, whatever the hell. It's good to hear her staking her claim to the opposite approach and doing it well. When she does it well, it's fabulous. And then, last but not least, Milstein, a classic. This is 1957, stereo, I think was the date. First rate in every way, aristocratic, full of taste and musicality and intelligence, and it really deserves to be in everybody's collection, along with just about everything else Milstein did. And that, my friends, is my take on the Dvořák Violin Concerto. Hopefully, it will be a stepchild of the repertoire no longer. Go out there and tell everyone how wonderful it is. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But keep on listening, and thank you for joining me. Take care.